CAT team. March 28th, 2022, hired him as a police officer trainee. And then May 2nd of this year, he is a full-time police officer currently going through the field training program. And not to jinx it, but it sounds like it's going pretty well. So a little history on Connor here. So he graduated Del Oro High School in 2013. And might be a big reason why he got hired. He joined the Marine Corps day after high school as a motor vehicle operator and combat marksmanship coach. He came from a big military family with 2 generals. He has his AA in criminal justice from Sierra College, and he got into law enforcement because he wants to help people. He's happily married and enjoys traveling with his wife. That is Connor Johnson. To his left, Hayden Clater. She's one of our dispatchers. She was hired on January 31st of this year. And she actually wrote this bio, so I'm going to read it. Just the way she, yep. That's what you get. From childhood, Hayden Clater's patriotism, love of country, and desire to serve her community steered her toward a career in law enforcement. Her calm demeanor and humble attitude was an ideal fit for dispatching and serving those in the most critical moment of their lives. Shortly after graduating high school, Hayden put herself through training and accepted a position at the Auburn Police Department in January of 2022. In the community she was born and raised in, her parents, siblings, and grandparents all lived locally in Auburn and Newcastle, along with her cousins, aunts, and uncles. With God's grace and diligence, she plans to have a long and distinguished career at the Auburn Police Department. Woo! Nope, you get all the credit for that. So again, 2 great employees, super excited with all the things that they've done already. And all kidding aside, definitely will have long careers here at the city of Auburn. So I'm proud to introduce them. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome. And thank you very much. Congratulations and welcome to our staff here. And Chief Nan, would you mind staying up there? We have a commendation for Bethany Thomas. Bethany Thomas here?
She's not here. So we were in touch with her. We're not sure where she's at right now. Are you going to read it anyways? It's awesome.
So, unless
I don't know what you think. You can watch it online.
you can watch it.
Bethany, if you're out there.
Here you go. You can read it there and I'll do that.
All right. So you do that last part, right?
Yes.
So today we'll be reading a City of Auburn commendation to Bethany Thomas. Whereas on the afternoon of June 3rd, 2022, Bethany Thomas arrived home and noticed 2 toddlers walking down the street. Assuming the parents of the toddlers were nearby, Ms. Thomas turned her attention away from the toddlers for a short time. In the meantime, though, the toddlers had already crossed an open portion of the residential street adjacent to Auburn Folsom Road, and the 2 toddlers were now actually in the traffic lanes of the busy road. Ms. Thomas recognized that these children were in immediate risk and danger of being seriously hurt or worse, and risking her safety, Ms. Thomas quickly ran into the roadway to grab both children as vehicles were approaching them. Ms. Thomas showed great compassion and care for the children even after officers arrived on the scene.
Now, therefore, I, Sandy Amara, Mayor of the City of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council and its citizens, hereby recognize and commend Bethany Thomas, wherever you are, for her exceptional actions and heroic efforts on June 3rd, 2022. And I will give this to Sergeant or Chief Canam, and you can give it to him. Thanks. Thank you. So thank you. The agenda approval. This is the time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Do I have any one from the council that needs to change? Public? Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the agenda as proposed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda will stand as is. The consent calendar, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Do I have anyone from the city council who would like a removal?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to remove item number 5 from the agenda, please. I mean, from the consent calendar.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone from the public? So do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar, removing item number 5.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Ramar.
Yes, thank you very much. Item number 5, that's the fire department mandatory inspection report. Ms.,
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just a couple questions. Hi, Chief. The information that was provided to us, the data, was from 2021. And I just kind of wondered if we had data for 2022. This is in particular, the 2021 Auburn Fire Department required business inspections. And so we have apartments, hotels, motels, says there's annual inspections required, 40, total inspected 0, pending was 0. Was this supposed to read 2022 or do we have data for 2022?
We'll report out for 22 at the end of the calendar, at the end of the fiscal year, like we're doing tonight. So, so the next report.
So do we have the data then for 2021? Because the 2021 data says, you have, like, for example, 40 of these apartments, hotels and motels, and that we've done 0. And so I don't know if is this the actual results from 2021?
Just one second, let me get there.
Okay.
You're talking about the apartments, hotels and motels. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So in that, remember in 21, we were in the midst of COVID.
Mhm.
So what we did was we sent out for the our occupancies and hotels and motels self-attestation forms like this to be able to capture the data.
Okay.
And so we really didn't do the inspection because we weren't there interfacing
Sure.
because of the events,
Mhm.
but we got our records back. So I don't count it as an actual inspection because we just had them do the self-attestation.
Okay. And then it looks like we had 5 pending inspections of schools. Did we finish those 5 by the end of 2021?
Yeah, no, we're still working with our school districts. They're a little bit challenging from time to time because they haven't, they're doing a lot of things to get back up into compliance. And so we're trying to be gracious with them and the process and procedures that they have, and we're moving them forward. So.
Okay, good. All right. And then the last question I had on that, I was wondering what facilities are institutional? Because we have schools as separate.
Mhm.
Is that governmental buildings? I mean, there's only 3, but I wasn't.
Yeah, great question. So institutions account for things like nursing homes, surgery centers, psychiatric facilities, those types of treatment and custodial type things are institutions.
Okay, separate from the community care facilities. Of
Correct.
course. Okay. All right, great. And so I guess the last question that I have really is that in the staff report, one of the things was an alternate was that we could request a reexamination of the fee schedule for 2019 that was adopted in 2019. I'm not necessarily ready to do that right yet because it's only been a few years. But going forward for 2022, do you feel that you have adequate staff to conduct the inspections as required? I know 2020 and 2021 were different because it was COVID and we weren't able to do some of these, and I totally get that. But do you feel like we have adequate staff to conduct those inspections?
Yeah, our mandated inspections are being conducted by our line staff, and they'll continue to do that. And we do that year over year.
Okay, great.
And part of the benefit or value added that comes with that is that they're actually getting into the facilities. They're doing some pre-planning so that should we have an event such as a fire or what have you, they're familiar with those buildings, and I want them to be in those buildings.
Yes, exactly. It's a really important precursor. I mean, I totally agree with you on that end. And then I keep saying the last, but I keep coming up with more questions. It's my understanding that there will be a requirement at some point for residences. Is that true? Or can you speak to that? Residential areas or homes that are in the very high fire severity zones. I should correct that.
Yeah. So currently, the legislation that's recently passed was AB 38, requiring an inspection on the sale and transfer of a home in a high
Yes.
or very high to a new owner. And that had to do with more disclosure and those types of things. What we're doing right now is we have a group of folks that have been helping us vet this process. As we lay out the city, there's approximately 5,000 homes and parcels associated with it inside the city. Those are too many for us to touch on every year. So our initial plan is to break the city into thirds and actually get to each individual parcel or property to do our wildfire urban interface inspection. And then at that point, we'll move to the second section and then the third section. So they'll be touched every 3 years. The important part of this is that there is legislation coming that will ultimately require folks to do mandated home hardening and so on and so forth. So it's my position that at this point, we need to get in front of this process. I do know that our ordinances are a little bit out of date with regard to current science and some of the requirements. So that's something that I'm going to need to update. We're doing a town hall meeting on the 14th of July here in the council chambers at 6 p.m. And we want our community to come and speak to our plan. Currently, this group, you may recognize some of the names that are currently working with us to kind of vet this process, to include the chair of the Fire Safe Council, Bob Snyder, Kathy Baxter, Rob Kisoff, and some others. And so there's been some great, and Jack Farless, of course. And so I've asked several of those folks to be on the panel with us, as well as Councilmember Berlant, representing CAL FIRE. And so currently there's a lively discussion about what we want to accomplish as a city, but everybody agrees that the common goal is that we inspect every parcel and property in the city and ensure that our community is safe and doing everything we can to prevent structure to structure ignition. So that's our common ground. Now, how we get there, that's to be determined. So,
Okay, and that's, you said on July 14th at 6 p.m.
correct.
Will that be something that's going to be streamed, or is that just going to be an in-person for folks? Because I think people might be very interested in that.
Yeah, and I think we have the capability here to continue to do our Zoom link,
Okay.
right? So we'll
Okay,
certainly
so
make
here in
every
the
effort.
in the chambers then. Okay, so, and I'll make sure I have that on my calendar as well, July 14th for that. Okay, well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. If we, I guess you'll let us know if through all these inspections and the additional requirements and so forth, if you need additional staff or, part-time or what have you to, ensure that we can get those done to keep people safe. So,
Certainly.
okay, thank you.
I have a question in the same regard that our Councilwoman Dalrymple had, which was the fee schedule.
Mhm.
It was on, you said it hasn't changed since 2008.
Yeah, sorry about that. We didn't update that. And so I should have pulled that off of there.
It's not, it was changed after 2008?
Yeah, isn't it
says
from
The
2019?
fee
19, yeah.
schedule has been in place since 2008.
Yeah,
That's not
Um,
correct?
that was the original fee schedule and we updated it in 19.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so as of 2019, it changed. You changed the amount. Okay, and again, I have the same question. Is that adequate? Some of them seem quite low, but I mean, this is a very important
Correct.
job that we have to do
And,
here.
and that's part of this process that we're doing with our community members and stakeholders, is trying to get their input and their buy-in for what we're trying to do. Because ultimately, if you think back about the presentation that I did on our community risk reduction program several months ago, ultimately that program needs to be self-sustaining. And so I think that's the best way to do it, to make it effective and efficient. And so that's the direction that we're heading in. Now, how we get there and what the specifics are at this moment, we're still trying to work out with our stakeholders.
Okay, and then if I understood you right, on the apartments, hotels and motels, you said there were 5,000, or did you say homes were 5,000?
No homes.
Homes were
Homes.
5,000. Okay. Thank you very much. And I think Councilwoman Riddell Harris?
Yeah, one quick question. You've talked in the past about, so these are mandatory. We would also like to be doing other commercial inspections to make sure that everyone, I mean, they're not as at risk for high fire injury because they're not normally on the canyon as much, but they have their own risks internally with kitchens and making sure that they have fire extinguishers and all that. Are we able to get to any of those yet? Or is that still something
We
on
are
our,
Currently not getting to those.
so we don't have the resources to get to any
Correct.
of those inspections that you'd like to do, but they're not mandatory?
Correct.
Okay. Just checking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? From the public? Do I have a motion?
I'll recommend that, I'll move that we receive and file this report.
A second?
Second.
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Daniel, thank you. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. Public comment. This is the time provided so the public may speak to the council on any item not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on items not included on this agenda. However, the items will be automatically referred to staff. Council members also have the option to speak on any item not on the agenda at this time. And I would just like to say thank you to our city manager who did such a wonderful job with the barbecue for the Western States. It was a success. It was a very, very good opportunity to get together and to have people who are coming into our town experience our barbecue here and our city staff working so hard and all the council members who are there to help too. So is there anyone else from the city council that would like to say anything?
I did want to just say that congratulations to all the finishers for the Western States Endurance Run. I mean, it's such a feat, 100 miles over some of the most treacherous trail, and it was very, very hot for those runners. And it was great to see Adam come across the finish line. This was his debut 100 miler. He was just here in Auburn a few weeks ago or a month ago where he won the 100K for Canyons. And so it was great to see him again here for this race. And just such a wonderful, humble young man, had a great conversation with his cousin. But I also want to give a shout out, Manoush, who works with Auburn Recreation District. He finished Western States this year. And so we're very proud of him. Local boy does good. And I don't know how many local runners there were, but I would like to just congratulate everyone and to thank everyone, all the volunteers. I know that our city manager was up at Robinson Flat all day Saturday with that aid station. And I know how dusty it is up there. So in any event, it's a great event for Auburn and a great event, in the endurance community. So
I just want to add, the first woman in was from New Zealand. Do you recall the name?
Ruth, her name was Ruth. Yes.
New Zealand.
And she was second last
bet you
year.
know.
Yeah.
Ruth Croft.
Ruth,
Croft,
that's correct.
that's right,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much.
Mayor Amara, I'm sorry. I was bringing this up. Ms. Thomas for the commendation is now in attendance. If you want to bring Chief back up and
Oh,
maybe
and
You
yeah,
do.
do you,
just reckon.
do you mind just going off just for,
The
bring it up and,
person's available to do the commendation.
Yes, absolutely. I will hide for as long as you want.
Be careful, Mr. Holmes. Miss Thomas. She's coming up. Come on up.
Come on up here. We had a dry run without you.
Yeah, we did a practice.
Take two. All right. So this is City of Auburn commendation for Bethany Thomas. Whereas on the afternoon of June 3rd, 2022, Bethany Thomas arrived home and noticed two toddlers walking down the street. Assuming the parents of the toddlers were nearby, Ms. Thomas turned her attention away from the toddlers for a short time. In the meantime, the toddlers had already crossed an open portion of the residential street adjacent to Auburn Folsom Road, and the two toddlers were now actually in the traffic lanes of the busy road. Ms. Thomas recognized these children were at immediate risk and danger of being seriously hurt or worse. Risking her safety, Ms. Thomas quickly ran into the roadway to grab both children as vehicles were approaching them. Ms. Thomas showed great compassion and care for the children even after the officers arrived on the scene.
so Bethany, now therefore I, Sandy Amara, Mayor of the City of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council and its citizens, hereby recognize and commend you, Bethany Thomas, for your exceptional actions and heroic efforts on June 3rd, 2022. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Your friends, they're taking pictures too.
Oh, yes, you have to have pictures. Thank you so much for stepping up and doing that. So often people just drive by, but you took the time to take, take action. So thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for bringing our attention to that. Council business, Western States Museum lease.
We still have public
Oh, I'm
comment. Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Holmes, how could I forget?
You can't forget Mr. Holmes.
Yes, thank you. Well, that was very nice commendation, but I want to say that on behalf of the Auburn State Theater, thank you very much for placing the Auburn State Theater on the historic list for the city of Auburn. And, it took 26 years to get that on the list. I hope it doesn't take that long to get another historic structure on the list. Secondly, I wanted to mention that I've been trying to get a meeting with council member Spokley for about 6 weeks. I thought he was very ill, but I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, number one, I wanted to thank him for his firm Wood. What is it? Wood. Yes, for their contributions to the youth of Placer County. One significant contribution went to the Auburn Placer County Boys and Girls Clubs with some foundation money to help them out. So I hope, Matt, we can get together soon here. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is, we've all heard a lot about scams on the internet and by telephone and so forth. I wanted to report that I was a potential victim of a scam. And I got a call last Monday, I guess it was, about I had been awarded $1.2 million for the Publishers Clearinghouse thing and $5,000 a week for a year if I did certain things that involved my paying to buy various things. And so I reported it to the Auburn Police Department, who took a report. And hopefully one of their suggestions was that I let people know that whether it's by telephone or by video or email and that sort of thing, beware of these things because it could cost a lot of money. And we know that a number of people in Placer County and elsewhere have lost a lot of money because of these scams. So if you want to know more details, I'll be happy to supply you with that. So
I'm very aware of scams. I've known a lot of people, and you're
you've
right.
done a lot of scams? What?
I've known a lot of people who are victims of it, and
Yeah.
elderly as well.
Yeah.
So thank you very
Well, I
much.
haven't reached that level yet.
No, I'm not.
but
I'm not
okay,
implying.
All right.
anything.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holmes. Is there anyone else? Oh, Jackie, thank you.
Hello, Council. Jackie Weston, CEO of the Auburn Chamber. I would like to apologize for not being here at the last council meeting, but I spared you all sickness by not being here. I didn't want to spread it. So I was on Zoom watching, and I want to first of all thank the city for the relationship that we have with the chamber. I'm thankful for our lease, but I also want to remind council that just 8 years ago, we took out a loan and got donations close to $150,000, plus hundreds of volunteer hours that all went into making that building usable for our use. So yes, we do appreciate our $1 a year, but there was also a lot of money and hours put into that. I'm also thankful to the city for our sponsorships, and just a line that sponsorships are not all income to the chamber. There are a fair amount of expenses that go along with sponsorships.
Absolutely.
I also want to make it known that we are not just here for events. We do have some parades that were talked about at the last meeting. But we have, and some of you don't know, a whole committee that's dedicated to going over the new laws that support small business. And we go against the ones that are bad for small business. Where there's many hours put in every month by that committee and our chamber volunteers and chamber staff to make sure our businesses in this area are taken care of. All of them, not just chamber members. And of those businesses, a lot of them in their city, and those city businesses pay tax revenues. When we fought along Councilmember Berlant and Manager Dunleavy for the shares grant to go to a bigger picture instead of small grants, the time and energy wasn't spent just for our members. It was spent for the region as a whole and city businesses. And as far as numbers and bringing people in, just last year alone, there's estimates of 20 to 25,000 people that came for our 2 little parades that we put on. Also, a large percentage of those people were from outside the city and from outside of our region. We have been told by the State Theater that they have spent countless years pushing to get the $10,000 on the budget line. Had we known that that was something that was possible, we would have fought as well. I think that moving forward on the budget, it would be nice to not see the State Theater and the Symphony as a line item, but as a general pot of money that is set forth to the organizations. I think that putting those 2 organizations alone on the budget is detrimental to the rest of us. So that's all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And we will be discussing the budget tonight, so we'll consider your thoughts. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay, thank you. Seeing no others, we will go on now to the Western States Museum lease update, 1103 High Street.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'd like to give a short update to the council regarding the status of the lease negotiations. As you're aware, in November of last year, the council authorized that we enter into a exclusive negotiation relationship with the Western States Trail Museum Board. Those negotiations have been progressing, and kind of the evolution of it has involved various proposals on behalf of the museum board and also demands by the city staff. For the most part, staff is kind of pressed on a couple of key areas. One is actually seeing the submission of operational, financial, and business plans for how the museum would operate. Some type of a preliminary budget. We've emphasized the importance of collaborating with the chamber. As Jackie just mentioned, we do have an extremely good relationship with the Auburn Chamber. And it is critical for some of the things that the museum board is looking to do is to get the chamber on board with everything. And we've also asked for some construction plans and rough estimates of overall costs just to gauge the overall veracity of the business proposal they're looking at. I will tell you that the museum board has actually exceeded all of the requests from the city. They have submitted their business and operational plans. They've submitted some preliminary budgets. One of the things that we've talked about is overall performance requirements within the context of the overall lease. If we're going to enter into a lease, the museum is going to have to meet certain deadlines and everything in order for the lease to stay value. The idea that we just issue a lease without those types of things wouldn't make sense. We've asked for preliminary architectural drawings. They've done that, and they've actually done They've actually exceeded a lot of that. I've also asked them to provide a listing of different funding sources. I'm asking them, how do they think they're going to pay for this? How do they think they're going to fundraise for it? Where's the money going to come from? And they've shared some of their insights on where they're going. I've included a list of the things that they have submitted. I did not include their funding sources because I would think other people would want to see their funding sources too. And then you would be on some bad mailing lists. Additionally, we've asked the museum, outside of everything, has done a full building assessment and structural mechanical look at the building. I will share with you that one of the main reasons why we've included some of the use of the ARPA money for 1103 is entirely predicated on a lot of the information that they brought in. As we've talked and gone through the process, as we've looked at the second floor, what happens on the second floor affects the first floor. And we've had quite a bit of things there. They've also done a very good accessibility review. So at the end of the day, anything that goes forward will meet all of that. And then finally, an overall reuse plan that they've done. So I will tell you that at this point, staff is absolutely right there on making a full recommendation to enter into a lease with the museum group. They are very well organized. They have a lot going for them. They have literally checked every box that we've asked them to do. There are a couple of things that still need to happen. First is the overall plans need to be reviewed and approved by the Chamber of Commerce. We currently have a lease agreement in place with them. One of the things that is about this is that anything that we would do with the museum board would have to happen with the Chamber of Commerce concurrently. In essence, we would revise one lease and enter into a new lease with the other. So one of the things I've asked the chamber to do is to make sure that they are in complete agreement. That would come in two forms. One is for Jackie Weston as the CEO to come to agreement. And then for the chamber board, they are the ones who have to give authorization regarding any modifications to the lease. So we've asked them to do that. And that is currently happening. Matter of fact, I think they have a meeting as early as tomorrow or sometime this week. Some of the other things that we need to have done is have the final development of the lease. And a lot of that will come down to overall timing. We have a very good framework for the lease. We've provided that. Ultimately, what we will need is not only the approval from the chamber saying that they'll basically get out of their lease, but also will then put in overall performance guidelines for them. That is basically the status of it. We think that we can actually put some of these things together pretty quickly. In talking with the chamber last week, they're going to work with the museum group to come to an agreement with everything. The next meeting for the chamber board is in July. So things could happen as early as that time. We will also work on the revised lease. Seriously, there are just a couple of sections that need to be updated. We've already provided a preliminary lease to the museum board. They've already made comments regarding all of that. So at this point, it's not necessarily a big deal. Tonight in the audience, I know that Hal Hall, who is the chair of the museum board, is here in the audience. Also is Michael Lemberg. I have included some of the preliminary drawings in there, so I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure that they'll take any questions from the council also. So
Thank you for your presentation.
And Madam Mayor, as the City Council's liaison to the Western States Trail Museum Board of Directors, I would just like to add, I appreciate the city manager's report. the board has been working very diligently to complete everything that the city manager has requested. And they've done an outstanding job. I've attended almost every meeting with them, very lengthy meetings, and they're really excited about this. They are really, they'd love to be able to move forward as soon as possible with a lease so that they can really begin their funding, their fundraising campaign, because I think some donors are really looking to have that lease before they can are willing to, which understandably so, to donate some big dollars. But they have been able to raise some money with very little efforts, and so that's very exciting. But I also wanted to let you know, I shared a postcard with everyone, all the council members. These are some postcards we just had printed that talk about the museum and our website and ways that folks can even donate to them. So again, very proud of what the work they've done, and really do appreciate the chamber and their support, and absolutely support the need for the chamber board of directors to approve those drawings for upstairs, since that will be their space. So looking forward to seeing Elise very soon.
Thank you very much for your efforts. I appreciate that. Is there any questions from the council? No? Councilman Berlam? I don't want to leave you out.
I don't, well, I guess, John, you mentioned the chamber getting to see this here in the very near future. Do you know, though, just looking at the map, is their current space and the upstairs space relatively the same?
I think they're pretty close. Obviously, there's a mirror. There are some areas, understand that the lower floor is going to be undergoing a pretty significant remodel. So there will be some flexing of the space downstairs, which is currently not included in the actual used space for the chambers. So to answer your question specifically, ultimately the building will have different dimensions. There will be other opportunities for the chamber on the second floor as part of the overall remodel. So on one hand, the lower area will change, so there'll be more space on the lower deck or the lower floor that is used. And I think the upstairs will be pretty comparable to the same amount of space that's being used by the chamber now.
And then in the drawings, 2 of the offices upstairs show as leased offices. What's the plan of who actually is going to manage the leasing of those 2 offices?
So that's part of the ongoing conversations we're having. And there's still many details that we need to work out, but they have included additional offices upstairs, and that's still in flux right now, because I know that the chamber has some ideas regarding where the lease, where the walls will actually go. But either A, there's a possibility that the chamber will be expanding, or B, the idea that some of those offices could be released. And we haven't come to an agreement with the chamber right now on who would actually take the revenue on that. So there are still some discussions regarding the additional office space upstairs.
And I just want to reiterate that we did have a meeting with the chamber about a month ago, it might have been. And the reality is, initially we were thinking that there was more space upstairs than the space that the chamber is using downstairs, but that looks like it's not the case. It looks like the usable space that the chamber has downstairs is just about the same amount of the usable space upstairs. So so at this point, and I think Jackie's shaking her head, that I think that the chamber was looking to utilize all of that space. And so then we were trying to come up with ways where perhaps all the tenants of the building would contribute to a maintenance fund or something to help generate a little bit of revenue to make the repairs to the building ongoing, not once the museum is already well established there, but maybe that each organization would donate something to help with the maintenance of the building. Because that's really what we were looking to have those lease spaces do, was to generate some revenue. But one of the agreements was that the chamber was going to be made whole, that the chamber would not lose any space moving upstairs. And I think that that's very important for the Western States Trail Museum Board of Directors. And I think Hal's shaking his head, yes. So that's the number one priority at this time. And then we'll negotiate going forward.
Just to be clear, are you negotiating with them?
I'm not negotiating.
You
really,
said
I'm
we,
city
we're going to
council.
negotiate. So that I would just.
I'm sorry. The board is working with the chamber. I'm just the city's liaison. So I'm there and I'm participating in the discussions. But I'm not
Okay.
negotiating on behalf of the city.
Yeah, I appreciate that and didn't mean to, call you out on what you're saying, but I think that's a vital piece of this whole thing is making sure that the intent is matched up with whoever from the city and the foundation and the chamber are truly negotiating space. I don't want to speak for Jackie, but I know I've talked to other members of the Chamber of Commerce since I am the liaison to the Government Affairs Committee to the Chamber.
Right.
And I know there's concern that has been shared with me as far as having other tenants in the same area that's in now a more open concept, unlike what they have downstairs where they are able to kind of wall themselves off. And so I just want to make sure that our representatives, and again, I would assume that was our city manager as we're negotiating that, are making sure that that the intent of the chamber space and the intent of the shared space, works to everybody's benefit. So appreciate those answers, and definitely it's exciting to see things start to take shape. So Madam Mayor, that's all I have. Thank you.
I think our city manager has something to say.
Yeah, the one place that we're at right now is simply trying to come to agreement between the chamber and the museum as far as what the upstairs is going to look like. Because as we look at the potential for some leased office space, as if there is a potential for us to bring additional revenue in to offset some of our overall costs, we absolutely want to do that. So that's just where we're at right now, is trying to determine what the floor plans are going to look like. And then once we've determined that, then we'll get into the next level of talking about the leased spaces or open spaces, because the chamber has some very legitimate concerns about security for what they're doing. So we're looking to try and balance all this thing. So the reason why I'm giving the update is there are some things that are still not yet completed. And I will assure you that as the agreement comes forward, that it will indeed be staff who is putting together all of this.
Thank you. And personally, I think it's very exciting. I'm anxious for this to get going as well, but devil is in the details. So we have to work through that, make sure that, it's fair and it's a fair discussion. And I would like to look forward to some additional revenue for the city. That would be wonderful too. So hopefully we'll hear back from you soon so that we can get this thing finalized. So thank you very much. And does that require a motion? Receive?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And is there any public comment? Thank you. None? Michael?
Yes, thank you. In 2004, this council approved a historical preservation ordinance. One of the elements of that ordinance was to find grants that could be used to preserve historic buildings and other things here in the city of Auburn. And in the 18 years since that ordinance was adopted, there has been no attempt to do that. So I'm coming back to ask again for this council to consider certified local government status which if it were adopted by the city, would then make the city available for grants from the state of California.
Wait, is this in reference to the Western States Museum?
Yes,
Can you
because,
just find show me the nexus?
well, because upstairs in the old city hall is a big hole. And somebody has to fix that. And it looks to me like it's on the city's responsibility to fix the leaks that are on the top of the building, or whether it's the,
The chamber, the downtown building? Are you talking about this building?
no, I'm talking about
11?
1103.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or whether it's the old library, our Carnegie Library building, which needs a lot of work. And as last council meeting, I was here to talk about the El Dorado Street Firehouse that needs a lot of work to keep that preserved. So what I'm asking is that members of this council encourage the city manager to get the HDRC in line to have a briefing from SHPO about the requirements and the advantagements advantage of having the city of Auburn seek a certified local government status.
Okay.
So the HDRC said, well, it's up to members of the city council to move that forward. So I'm asking you to suggest to the city council, the city manager, that,
You know what? I will talk to the city manager and we'll get back with you on that.
okay. all right.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Holmes. Okay, thank you. So live 911 service agreement. Is that Chief Canan? And that's for the 12-month service agreement with Higher Ground to provide their live 911 service.
All right. Good evening. Lieutenant Tucker Huey, the Auburn Police Department, and here for another piece of technology. All right. So to kind of set the framework, I think it's important to understand how our dispatch center actually functions. So when someone's reporting an emergency call, basically that call comes in. Typically, we'll have one dispatcher on duty. So that one dispatcher will answer that 911 call and obtain all of the relevant information from the caller. Sometimes they can kind of miss subtle cues because the dispatchers live at the police department, whereas the officers are out on the street. They know the neighborhoods, they know the people. And so a lot of times some of that information can be missed, which is an important note. And then from that point, they create a synopsis of what the caller is reporting. And then with that synopsis, the dispatcher then actually keys up the radio and tells the officers in the field what's going on. A point of note there as well is when that dispatcher is relaying that information, one, it's a synopsis and it's free from emotion and tone. So what we're looking to get is called Live 911. It's basically it live streams the 911 audio directly to the first responders in the field. So the officers have real-time information from what the caller's reporting. It kind of cuts down some of the delay from the dispatcher relaying that information. It can help by improving de-escalation because the officers have better understanding of what's actually occurring before they get there. Their big thing is Live 911 was developed to help save lives in communities, and it absolutely can do that as well as help keep officers safer. So again, kind of some bullet points. The officer is able to hear the 911 call in real time at the same time as the call taker. The dispatcher will actually have an indication that an officer is on the call, and they can now focus on asking those questions and getting it out. They know that they can delay actually broadcasting it out to the officer, which allows them to kind of spend their time a little more wisely. The officers also, again, we talked about geofence last time. Again, geofence technology is in play here. So the GPS on the vehicle will know when a 911 call is being made from in their area. So they will see that a 911 call is coming up, around the corner. And rather than waiting for that dispatcher to figure out what's going on, where it's happening, and that time delay piece I was telling you about, they get that right away and know right around the corner this is happening and can click right on. And again, so kind of to the tone. So the officers are able to hear just how frantic the situation is. When someone's reporting a fight, that can mean a lot of different things. And so to actually be able to get that firsthand understanding of the emotion and the tensions of the situation and kind of better understand that threshold of how high level of an emergency is this. It's going to help us reduce our response time because, simply it's happening quicker. The officers know quicker. Officers can get there and resolve the situation quicker. Another big consideration is the real-time updates. So again, that's a point that a dispatcher has to focus on when they're doing their job is at what point do I need to stop the caller so that I can update the officers of what they said? And so it's kind of this constant ebb and flow of they get information, pause them, put it out, go back, get more. And so that step is eliminated. It's hosted through the web browser. And so if I'm in my office and I hear an emergency happening, or if we spin it up an emergency operation center, we can get on there and we can see what 911 calls are coming up. A large fire, every time someone's calling 911 to give updates on the fire, we're going to be able to monitor those from the command center. Obviously, that gives us just instant awareness of how the situation is unfolding. Here's a snapshot of what it looks like. This is actually Chula Vista, but you kind of see in the top middle there's 3 active 911 calls. So the officer can listen into that call. They can disregard that call if it doesn't apply. And then it uses our rapid SOS, which is the anti-alley information. So every time you call 911, it gives the dispatch center the location. It's actually tying that directly into the patrol car. And again, so it's configurable through the geofence. We can make that determination as to how far out we want that buffer. Probably as we go live, we're 7.5 square miles. So we'll call it 7.5 square miles, kind of evaluate that functionality, but we can dial that down into, we only want the officers to know, a 1 mile bubble or a 2 mile bubble. So we can play with that. Another great thing is we can rewind the audio. So if you're listening to the call, you don't quite hear what they said, you can go back and listen to it again. Same thing that happens when the officers are doing their investigations. If there was a piece that they didn't quite catch that now becomes relevant after speaking to the involved players right there in their car, they can just go back and re-listen to it. So we are truly kind of the pioneers. So we will represent the 11th city in California to implement this. So to the fiscal impact, it's a one-time cost of $1,380, which represents the installation, configuration, and the training, with an annual recurring cost of $6,000 annually. The total initial investment will be $7,380, and the program cost will be absorbed in the current police department base budget. It's in line with both, again, the city and the police department strategic goals of using technology to bolster our response to provide safety and effectiveness and efficiency. And so at this point, the staff recommendation would be to approve the 12-month service agreement with Higher Ground to provide the live 911 service. And then if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to take those.
Thank you for the great report. Great technology. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lieutenant Huey, thank you very much for the report. It does seem like some pretty cool technology. I'm just curious, the officer who's linked up in their vehicle, is there an option to turn it on or off, or is it just something that starts, the call's automatically shot over to their car? How distracting Do you
So they
think this
get
would be-
a tone, a notification that there's an active 911 call in their area. So it's just kind of almost like a ringtone thing. And then from that prompt, they have to physically select into the call to hear it.
Okay,
So it's a conscious effort on their part to actually have the audio playing, because yes, it could be a distraction.
and we all hear the funny, not so funny, but the calls that come into 911 that are completely non-emergency related. Those calls still get shot out through this program. They'll get shot out to an officer as well, right? Even calls that might get weeded out with conversation that dispatch has with the callers. Those are still going to go directly to the officers.
Yes, so the technology is only identifying it as a 911 call, which is why on the kind of that front page, you saw there's the option to click into the call and play it, as well as the disregard button. And so obviously that, a quick couple seconds, the officer should be able to determine that the call's not really relevant and they don't need to be listening in, and they can just discard the call at that point and go back about their day.
Okay. And I don't know if you know this stat, but of the 911 calls that come in, how many actually are translated to calls for service that get sent out to officers to respond?
A shot in the dark, it's probably about a third result in an actual call.
Okay. So there could be a lot of distraction, I guess, even though it is just a tone. That would be my only concern, but we're the only city in the area that will be implementing this at this time.
Yes.
Do you can you share the list one more time?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's California cities. Got it. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Dowden Cavill.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate this and your report. And I also appreciate that we continuously look to improve our ability to respond using technology. It's about time, and I really do appreciate that. So just wondering, and this kind of correlates to some of the report that's in the budget that we're going to talk about later, but I'm just wondering how this system might improve if we've incorporated the data the data from the reports with this new equipment into the projected numbers for next year on our workload indicators. Does that make any sense? Like, for example, percentage of 911 calls answered within 10 seconds. Is that going to make any difference to that? Will this software make any difference to that percentage?
No, not per
Okay.
se.
So really, it's just the ability of the officers you'll be able to respond. It's not really responding to answering the call. It's really just being able to respond.
Right. It's a
Okay.
tool to allow the officers to respond quicker
Directly.
and with more front hand knowledge and information.
Okay. I'm wondering if going forward, when we take a look at our budget, if we can maybe incorporate some of that information into our, the numbers for next year for the budget. Do you know what I'm talking about, Chief? So in the budget, under the performance-based budgeting, we have these workload indicators. For example, overall crime to total number rate, et cetera. We have something in here about total calls received by dispatch, total 911 calls received by dispatch, percentage of 911 calls answered within 10 seconds. And we have data from FY 2019, 20, 2021, et cetera, et cetera.
Wait.
So I'm just wondering if we might be able to put an indicator in there that would somehow measure the success of the new software.
Yeah, so for the record, Ryan Canan, Chief of Police, I think I know where you're trying to get to. It's our response time to the calls.
Yes.
How quickly can we respond to our calls? And typically we don't put that in there because a lot of that is previous to this technology. The driver to that really is, one, the number of calls that we get in to
Mhm.
call to us, but also the staffing.
Yeah.
If we get a number of calls into us and our staffing hasn't changed, those calls for service, the timeliness is going to go up, right?
Sure.
This technology, now that we can implement this, will allow us to, certainly to the higher priorities, so the priority one type calls that come in, those are typically the 911 calls. this technology will allow us to get to those faster. Very much the way Lieutenant Huey explained it.
Mhm.
The officers are actually getting the call as it comes in, as
Sure.
opposed to going through those
Having
steps
to
of
wait, then they can,
dispatchers.
if they're in the area, they can respond quicker. I'm just wondering if there's a way to measure measure the success of the software.
Absolutely. And that will be one of our, if it doesn't make the performance measurements, but it more than likely will,
Software. Yeah.
it will definitely be one of the mechanisms that we use to track. And those are all the different nuances that we do try to track to figure out how well are we doing.
Yep. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Oh, Councilwoman Riddell Harris?
Thank you. On my technology. Thank you. I really appreciate this. I'm always up for some new technology to make things work more efficiently. I guess I'm on the same path as Congresswoman.
Wow. Thank you.
All right. Councilwoman Don Covio. Just what normally when I look at new technology, what are kind of the goals of what you're trying to achieve, and did you achieve them with the technology? So it's just kind of coming back to us in 6 months to a year and saying, this is what we were hoping to do with it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a number, because sometimes these are hard to quantify, like you were saying, but maybe there's some particular instance where it worked really well, or you could give examples. Something else that might be helpful is if maybe there was an opportunity for us to see a demo of how it works, because that would be kind of helpful for me to get a sense of how that distraction works and all that kind of stuff. That would be nice to see too. But this looks great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we can report out on how we use it, and we love showing off our technology. So we're definitely get a demo day set up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And would this by any chance eliminate any, in the future, if it works very well, any, cost to the police department?
Not necessarily at this point. So our current minimum staffing for dispatch is 1. So obviously we can't reduce below that. But, as the technology kind of is starting to, it's kind of a snapshot to the future, right?
Right.
And so, this might be kind of the crux of shifting to, work from home dispatchers or, dispatch call centers. So it's too early to tell, but I could see this kind of shaking up the industry standards.
Good. Well, thank you. I think it's just cutting edge. Fantastic. I love that you're bringing these technologies and ways to improve service and make our community safer. Fantastic. Love it. Is there anyone in the audience or in the public that would like to speak to this? Councilman Berlam, I'm sorry, I missed you, but I don't see your hand up.
Yeah, that's okay. I didn't have any questions. I'll just note though, if you have not had opportunity to do a sit along in our dispatch center with a one dispatcher, those women and formerly men do a lot of multitasking. And so I can see a lot of value in having our officers be able to listen in directly and not have to wait for the delay for the dispatcher to pause from their conversation, communicate on the radio, and more or less be the middleman. Though they do it very well, this allows them to provide, I think, direct guidance to the caller, listen intently, and let the officers be able to hear for themselves without having to have it relayed. So I, for one, am excited. I can understand the concerns. I can understand the desire to have some measurables, but I 100% know that this is going to provide some enormous efficiencies and get our officers to calls likely very quicker and with more intel. So thank you, Lieutenant, and to the police department for bringing this forward.
Yes, thank you. Anyone in the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so do we have a resolution?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll move by resolution that we approve entering into a 12-month service agreement with Higher Ground to provide their live 911 service.
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. That passes. Thank you. Now, number 9, operating debt service capital project budget salary schedule for the fiscal 22-23 and projected 23-24 final adoption.
Good evening, Mayor Amara, members of the council. For the record, I'm Nathan Bagwell. I serve as your Director of Administrative Services. I have the pleasure this evening and privilege of presenting the fiscal year 2022 and 23, as well as 23 and 24 proposed budget. What we're going to be, just a high level, what we're going to be talking about tonight is we're going to quickly and briefly, you've seen all these slides before, but we're going to provide context for those for the first time who are seeing this and allow for time for discussion as the council desires. We'll be discussing our development process to date, the strategic priorities that were the driving forces of developing this budget, our methodology. We'll take a look at the general fund budget summary as well as a 5-year forecast. We'll discuss ARPA funding, as well as the proposed use of general fund reserves that has resulted from 3 years of surpluses. We will talk about proposed changes to staffing levels, as well as general fund revenue and expenditure summaries. We'll discuss discretionary support by the city council, and we'll conclude the conversation with the capital improvement program. So to date, in March of this year, staff brought back a mid-year budget update that addressed the closeout of the previous fiscal year. Since that time, we've been working in earnest with department heads, discussing and determining the overall operating and capital budgets as proposed, as you see in the budget this evening. We've discussed this 3 times in the public sphere, once on May 9th, again on May 23rd, and most recently on June 13th. And tonight, we are here to consider the adoption of the proposed budget. So as we mentioned before, the driving force of the budget process has been the strategic priorities as defined by you, our city council, high-performing government, fiscal sustainability, the safety of our community, and the health and welfare with an emphasis on fire prevention, quality infrastructure and transportation, preservation of Auburn's small town charm, as well as a focus on sustainability through such programs that enhance environmental planning and transit opportunities, culture and entertainment, as well as our gem, the thriving Auburn Airport. So the methodology, just briefly, is we have an incremental budget approach, which means that we take a baseline budget from the previous year, we analyze trends, and then at that point, then we meet with the departments and go over the trends as well as any requests for increases and analyze any opportunities for savings. We would like to mention that all positions are considered funded at 100% unless otherwise noted throughout the forecast. And with that, I do want to mention an interesting caveat to this budget. So we're talking about a 2-year context, but we're adopting 1 year. Okay, so what we're really doing is adopting year 1 and projecting year 2. So we will be coming back at mid-year. We will be coming back and doing this process, working with a baseline of year 2. But at a glance at 50,000 feet, the combined years, we're looking at $33.8 million in general fund expenditures, 17 in the coming fiscal and 16.7 in the following. This does encompass $4.3 total million of pension costs. That is covering debt service, our normal pension, our normal payroll costs, as well as any unfunded accrued liability. And what we will discuss in a bit is a use of approximately $2 million of general fund balance for one-time projects from one-time revenue surpluses. So just for context, we're going to get into some specifics of the 5-year forecast of the general fund. What you see here covers about 7 years. The year that we're in right now is fiscal year 21-22, with which we estimate an approximately $660,000 surplus at the end of the year. As proposed, the coming fiscal year, there is an operational proposed deficit of $195,000, followed by a more moderate deficit proposed of $30,000, after which the city is proposed to be back into the surplus in the 3 outlier years of the forecast. So we're going to discuss ARPA funding. What that is, it's the American Rescue Plan Act. The city has been awarded, well, the city has received $3.4 million from the federal government. Per the U.S. Treasury's guidelines, this money has to be programmed how we intend to spend that by the end of next fiscal year. We need to have this money expended by the end of fiscal year 2026. As proposed, the budget has $1.9 million in ARPA funding in the current upcoming fiscal year, as well as just over $1 million in the following year, and rounding it out in the 3rd year with $100,000. What this is discussing is in April of this year, the United States Treasury issued a final ruling with regards to ARPA funds. Essentially, because the city has received less than $10 million, the city is allowed and able to make a one-time designation to elect the entirety of our $3.4 million for essentially government services and capital. Just want to outline that the ARPA funding strategy is aligned with the city's strategic priorities with regards to high-performing government, We have, this budget contemplates modernizing and updating our technology, workspace, and environment with regards to fiscal sustainability, as well as sustainability through programs that key in on environmental planning and transit and economic opportunities. City is pursuing a form-based code update, records management program, municipal code update, updates to rate and fee structures. With regards to the safety of the community, protecting the health and welfare of our citizens with a strong emphasis on fire prevention, this budget contemplates improvements and updates to traffic collection data, police and fire capital improvements, all 3 fire stations, as well as new equipment for the fire department. Specific to quality infrastructure and transportation, there is a significant focus on planning, such as doing an environmental impact review, seeding a general plan update, as well as focus on the business corridors, which leads us to then the preservation of Auburn's small town charm, whereas $500,000 of capital for each. The Old Town Business Association and the Downtown Business Association is contemplated through the ARPA funding in this proposed budget. So this is a list of the projects as they are proposed in the upcoming years. Something I want to address specific to a question that Councilmember Berlant had at the last council meeting was regarding NEPA guidelines. As for our research, it does not appear as though NEPA guidelines are going to prohibit the use of ARPA funds with regards to the facility improvements proposed for the Carnegie Library. As you can see, there's $75,000 in this year and next. There's also $75,000 proposed for the High Street Chambers this year and next. And something else I wanted to highlight, that's $150,000 to begin initial phasing of broadband updates in the city both this year and next. So we're going to have a brief discussion now about general fund balance and reserve levels. The total general fund balance projected at the end of this coming year. So essentially 3 days from now, we're anticipating the general fund cash to be $7.1 million. In that $7.1 million, we have things that we consider assigned. $2.7 million for a rainy day fund, $1 million for pension stability, as well as about $300,000 for prepaid insurance. So essentially we have $4 million set aside. That leaves $3 million available for use, simply unassigned funds. This is just briefly going to touch upon how we end up with general fund reserves. What this is intended to do is kind of give some context on when we look at that 5-year forecast again, and we see the last 2 years and the year that we're in, we have significant surpluses. So what happens is the budgets are developed during the spring. So right now we're doing the budget for the coming fiscal year. The year ends, we actually don't get the actuals from the revenue data until really later in the year. So the year ends, we actually get the actuals. So what's happened, I'll use 2021 as an example. We actually anticipated when we adopted the budget of 192,000 operational deficit. What ended up happening, which is great, is we ended up with a $1 million operational surplus. That's a pretty big swing. That's a $1.2, $1.4 million swing, but that's how it happens. In this current fiscal year, it's even kind of more a larger example where we anticipated a $500,000 deficit. We now anticipate a $635,000 operational surplus. 1.1 million swing. One of the major contributing factors to that has been COVID over the last couple of years. It's been really difficult to predict, how that's going to affect our economy and how that's going to affect the revenues that come in through sales tax and the such. So we've been fortunate. The pandemic effects haven't been as dire as they could have been, or we thought they might be. And we've also had some pretty strong sales tax returns. So the total net effect from the previous 2 years and the projected current year is approximately $1.7 million in general fund balance reserve. So what this is looking at is this is actual cash. It's 10 years. Now, if you look back about 10 years, we started the fiscal year 12-13 with about $2.7 million in cash and ended it with 2.9, pretty balanced. As you can see over the years, this has grown. What we're looking at for the upcoming end of this year is roughly $6.8 million by the end of 23-24. What this does not do, this does not contemplate any use of fund balance. This is just to show you essentially the way the cash is building up in the general fund because of surpluses and because of our conservative spending operations. So within that cash, these are what we call our assigned reserves. On an annual basis, we set aside, or we actually earmark these funds within the general fund and say, as you see, let's go to the line for 21-22, our current fiscal year, $2.7 million set aside for economic uncertainty, rainy day, $350,000 for prepaid insurance, and $1 million for pension stability. This has changed over the years. As you can see, about 10 years ago, it was about 679,000, fairly modest unassigned balance. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we say, okay, we don't really have any specific use for this. This is something we have flexibility with, and or we just want to keep it there in cash. So this was growing over time. In 2019 and 20, council identified the need to set some money aside in preparation for upcoming and large unfunded accrued liability costs, which has been addressed, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you can see the unassigned fund balance dropped down significantly, which doesn't mean the cash was gone. It just meant that we essentially in our savings account had purposes identified for them. And as we've gone through the years now, we've dropped that number down because council wisely issued a pension obligation bond. So now we have $1.1 million in pension obligations set aside, but we still are accumulating more and more unassigned fund balance. So what I want to point out here is the asterisk at the bottom right there. That's what our unassigned fund balance, essentially our flexibility would be, even with hanging on to these other funds for these specific purposes with the utilization of the surpluses over the last 3 years. So you can see it brings us to about $1.8 million at the end of the coming fiscal year and about $1 million at the end of the second proposed fiscal year. This graphic is just showing the same information in a slightly different way. So the blue line is the beginning fund balance, and the orange is the ending fund balance. What was gray on my screen earlier is that kind of smaller line next to those two, and that's our unassigned fund balance. Again, just the cash that isn't really earmarked for anything. And as you can see over the years, the city has been either well above in terms of revenue or pretty balanced in terms of how we've gone through each and every year. And we continue to and anticipate to continue doing so. But this is just providing a little more context. Fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. I believe this was a request as well. And this is a great graphic to really take a look at what we're setting aside as far as what we have for cash in terms of overall expenditures. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of like 25%. We tend to want to hover around 30%, 25 to 30%. So we've been over the last 10 years down to 35%, up to 64%. And this does not contemplate the use of fund balance. So we would be about 41% without using the fund balance. This assumes the use of fund balance. So if you key in on the last two levels there, I'm just blanking on the word pillars, 34 and 30% over the next 2 years, even with using the proposed fund balance for one-time projects. This is what we anticipate using that money for. There's $700,000 in both years for a critical infrastructure storm drain project. All 3 fire stations have upgrades and repairs contemplated, as well as setting some money aside for a self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department. And for the next 2 years, dropping the fire truck lease down and out of the general fund and using some surplus funds to pay for that. So now that we've kind of had a conversation about those years in the black of 1920, 2021, 21, 22, how we get to that situation. We've taken a look at essentially what we're looking to do with that money. And now we kind of have a little bit more context on how we got to where we are. Just want to touch briefly on the airport and sewer funds. So the airport is anticipated to have a fund balance of 2.3 million at the end of this fiscal year. And even with the projected capital projects within the airport fund, it is anticipated to have a balance of 1.3 million. Sewer fund is anticipated to have a balance of just over 8 million at the end of this fiscal, and factoring all the capital, 5.7 at the end of the next. So essentially the big takeaway are 2 things. We anticipate having healthy fund balances for both the airport and sewer funds. Both of these enterprise funds are self-sustaining as we look out over time horizons. So we do anticipate them to continue on being very healthy. Staffing levels. So the reason for this graphic right here is just to highlight, this is from the 2016 budget document. Essentially, the big takeaway from this was that pre-Great Recession, the city of Auburn had 103.5 full-time equivalents. By 2016, we had come back to about 73. This next graph kind of shows a little more context as to where we've been over the last maybe 14 years or so. As you can see, we dipped down for a while there in the 15, 16 range. As I was reading back and researching this was a great research project, by the way. I really want to thank council for sending us back to this because this provided so much context. There were a lot of frozen positions. There was a lot of just very cautious and steady growth. What I see, what we've been doing and what we continue to do is just strategically restaff, focusing these resources on opportunities and ensuring that we move forward very cautiously to where we are proposing to be in the next coming fiscal years. And then this is another look at the general fund balance. So the purpose of putting these two slides back to back is really to show, okay, so here are our FTEs as we grow throughout the years. And this is what this really looked like in terms of our bottom line. So the blues are expenses, and again, the oranges are revenues. And you can see the expenses are growing, as are the revenues. And that is a key focus of why we are projecting and proposing to add these positions, as we'll get to in just a moment. So specific to what these proposed staffing changes are, there's a reclassification, and on the next slide, we'll get into specifically what the costs are and how that lives in the funds. But there's a reclassification of an economic development and planning manager to director. There's an administrative assistant to focus on economic development airport. There's a management analyst for the city manager's office with a focus on grants. Public works manager is essentially a city engineer. There's a management analyst for the airport, as well as the discontinuation of 3 emergency limited term firefighter positions. So this is where we really get into the nitty gritty of how we pay for these positions. So for the administrative assistant position, that is covered 50-50 between the airport and the general fund. That's a cost of $82,000. For the reclassification of the economic development planning manager to director, that's about a $30,000 total expense. In addition to what we're already paying for that position, that's split half and half between the airport and general fund. The management analyst for the city manager's office, essentially the grants position, is a $97,000 anticipated expense, 1/4 of which will go to the airport, sewer, transit, and general fund. The public works manager, the city engineer, anticipated to be a total of $173,000. We anticipate this being 50% sewer, 25% each to the airport and transit. And keep in mind too, that these are some estimates in there because we also do allocate some project costs out depending on what that position is focusing on and the capitalized it's moving through, as well as a management analyst for the airport. Same cost as the other management analysts, about $97,000. That is 100% to the function and the support of the airport. So what this is doing now is this slide is really just stepping back and taking a look at just the year that we are looking to adopt. Overall, as you can see, the total revenues anticipated are $16.8 million. The total expenditures, $17 million. And we do anticipate an operational deficit of budgetary deficit of $195,000. This is looking at year 2, the projected year of the budget. Pretty static, pretty conservative estimates as far as growth assumptions. Revenues about 16.75 million, expenditures about 16.7, moderate operational budgetary deficit of 30,000 is anticipated. So this combines both years. So kind of circling back to the very first slide that we saw, where we had about 33.8 million expenditures, 33.6 million in revenues. So assuming everything goes precisely as we predict, which I can assure you it will not, not to take any confidence away from the budget, but these are built on estimates and we will come back with actuals. But we are anticipating that there could be up to a $225,000 operational budgetary deficit in the combined years. So this slide kind of brings us back to pension obligation bonds. As anyone will tell you, staffing costs are the single greatest cost of any public agency. And one of the just realities of staffing a public agency is paying for PERS. So quickly what this does is the blue going across the bottom, that's the normal cost. That's just the cost of having employees that are PERS and getting a pension someday. The orange is what we call, or what is unfunded accrued liability. And as you see, the orange is kind of ticking up and it was going to continue to ticking up. And then it drops off. Well, it drops off because of the green. The green is the pension obligation bond debt service. So what the green's doing is really, it's just flattening out our costs. So we got a significantly lower rate than we would have been paying through PERS on this unfunded accrued liability. And what ends up happening is every 2 years, PERS comes out with updates to their reports and actuarials and new reports and new assumptions. So that's why the orange doesn't just drop off when we yes, we kind of went through this probably a lot when we were going through the issuance, but we've got these 2 years where PERS is kind of going to catch us up and come out with new calculations. And we anticipate that orange to possibly be a very small sliver in the future if they were to change their assumptions actuarially and or change their discount rate, which is what they anticipate their return on investment to be. But my favorite part, and I think Councilman Stokely also enjoys, the red line across the top. That's what we were going to have to pay at the rate that we were going. So the gap between the top of the green and the red line is quite literally dollar savings. And as it shows in year 5 right there, it's $500,000 per year. So that showed excellent foresight and wisdom by the council. And that is one of the reasons why we are able to reduce our anticipated pension obligation in the assigned reserves, not get rid of it, but just kind of reduce it down because you addressed it already. So we're going to discuss discretionary support. I had an opportunity to go back and look at kind of some of the history of this because I really kind of wanted to understand where we're coming from and where we're going. So we used to be somewhere in like the 50 to 60,000 range. This current fiscal year, we were about 135. So coming into this next year, council is putting forward a pretty generous and historically significant $200,000 investment into the community. What this encompasses is funding towards a city historian, art commission, economic development commission, sustainability advisory committee, endurance capital committee, SHAC for our tiles, our historic tiles. There are sponsorships involved. There are also contributions to TV and library contributions, as well as $10,000 each for the Auburn Symphony and State Theater. Some of the things that are proposed to be covered through these appropriations. For the Art Commission, for the School Park Reserve, concerts, theater, and dance, mosaic mural for the School Park Reserve, installation of the sculpture, art park decorations, and venue maintenance and improvements, as well as the City Hall Gallery, Council Chamber Stage Events, and Public Art Fund. The Economic Development Commission is proposing to use their appropriation for a market and economic development study, which will provide analysis and data-driven solutions. Sustainability Advisory Committee proposes to use their allocation for website maintenance and design, as well as solid waste reduction and organic waste stream reduction within the community, as well as supporting the Auburn Master Plan. The Endurance Capital Committee proposes to use their allocation to have a larger event presence and promotional materials, Central Square Endurance Zone recognition tile, water bottle filling stations, as well as marketing and website support. And SHAC is going to be putting forward some tiling engravings for 4 tiles previously approved by council in May of 2021 and Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo. So we will be in touch with regards to making sure that we true up on what funds we're going to use. So you already know where I'm going with that. So we'll definitely circle back with that. That's on our radar for sure. And I do, before I move on from discretionary support, council has asked, and the city manager and I will be coming back with a proposal for a program with which committees and commissions can put forward their requests on an annual basis, and council will have an opportunity to consider it from a community benefit standpoint, as well as ensure that you're able to kind of consider the overall and go forward with there. So wanted to make sure I'd mention that.
Yeah, just maybe as a little follow-up. For the funds, we know that the funds that have been put in for both the State Theater and the Symphony have kind of drawn an overall interest. At the end of the day, these funds represent really a discretionary fund for the council. The council has given direction to the staff that they want us to come back for the use of any funds that go out to groups with some type of granting process. At the end of the day, there will be some form of a requirement for overall public benefit. And in essence, any types of the grants would require an overall quid pro quo, that we would identify any monies that would go out that would require a public benefit and a different definition of the use of the funds.
Thank you. And so this is a look at our capital improvement plan. And so what this graphic is doing essentially is tying in all of our expenditures by category. So as you see on the left, this is also tying to the main table at the beginning of the capital improvement plan, which is part of your agenda packets and the proposed budget that you've got. airport, sewer. These all tie specifically directly to funds. It gives us an opportunity to track things with a level of accuracy that is continuing to improve and get better on an annual basis. And now this is looking at expenditures by program. So we went from category to program, and below is a graphical representation of the same above. As we look at, $12 million in next year and $6 million in the following, some pretty exciting projects on the horizon. So in summary, we've discussed a 2-year budget proposal that encompasses a grand total of $33.8 million of expenditures. However, we are looking to adopt one of those years, the first one. We've discussed a comprehensive ARPA funding strategy that's consistent with council's strategic goals. This is a historically significant investment in the community. Critical infrastructure, foundational enhancements, updates to the seating of the city's general plan, our municipal code, technology, records management. The proposed staffing enhancements are designed to generate revenues and increase overall efficiency of operations, and they are spread out so as to maximize the opportunity to support them with the use of funds that they are in fact working for in projects capital-wise. And additionally, the city retains a strong cash position. Monitoring our economy, we will come back as needed. We will definitely come back at the mid-year staff report and at the annual budget, but we can come back as needed as well. But we are really keeping an eye right now, not just on the economy, but also things within the economy, inflation right now, the cost of things. And we also don't know, like right now we're doing a classification and compensation study. We don't know the results of that. So you will be apprised of that as we find out. So there's a lot of things we're going to find out in the coming year, a lot of things that we're uncertain about, but we always have the ability to halt projects as needed. And we will continue to be conservative and continue to work steadily and earnestly towards, having a balanced budget. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time listening.
Very
to
good.
me.
Thank you.
course.
Councilwoman, anyone questions? Riddell Harris, did you have any? Or comments? You don't have to.
I
Comments,
actually
too.
had a kind of a weird, quick question. Thank you for this presentation. It was great. I feel like we've had ample time to look over this. We've gone through each individual part and all of it together. And so I feel like we've all had a good chance to ask most of our questions. Something that I saw on this is that in the FTE counts, you count 5 council members, like as us as each of FTE. But in the salary schedule, it doesn't show how much we're paid. Just food for thought. It might make sense since we're considered an FTE, or maybe we don't get considered an FTE. Might make sense to just put how much our salary is contributing to
The stipend.
Our $300.
our $300. I'm trying to make it so because when you look at 5 FTEs, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you look at how much those 5 people are really getting paid, it goes down substantially. So I just wanted to kind of make it either we take us out of the FTE count because we're not really a substantial cost, or we just make it clear that that's really, some people don't know that we don't get paid very much. So it might just
We
make
get
it
pennies
clear.
for the hour. On the.
I just wanted to make sure
Thank
that
you.
we're creating that clarity.
Sure, we can
But-
do that.
Okay. Councilman Spokely?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Nathan, great presentation. Do appreciate it. It was an early slide in your deck. Can you go back to the slide that kind of line by line showed what the ARPA monies were going to be spent on? It's like 12 or 13, I think.
I can't believe I made you sit through all this. I'm sorry.
There
There
it
we
is.
go.
There it is. So I guess to follow up on our earlier conversation, the High Street, the Chamber building, I thought, and maybe this is a question for the city manager, I thought the association was gonna pay for all of the costs associated with the improvements needed to move the chamber upstairs. Isn't that correct?
They will. What these improvements are specifically to go in and make repairs to the building.
The roof.
For both Carnegie and for 1103 High Street,
Okay.
we are talking about going in. The HVAC systems are ancient. The roof, it is not an understatement to say that 1103 High Street, there's a giant hole in the top of the building. So we are looking at going in and doing overall capital replacement on that. The only exception would probably fall in accessibility. We look at the roofs at both buildings. We look at the mechanical at both buildings. The one exception would be any types of improvements that have to go towards accessibility. At Carnegie, there are huge needs for accessibility, and also at 1103, there are some things that we need to upgrade there. So conceivably, as part of the new remodel, they are going to have to do some things. But when it comes to some of the accessibility improvements, we are allocating some of the 75,000 or the 150,000 towards those types of things, and we'll have to figure out what those are going to be.
And Councilman Spokley, to that end, the Western States Museum Board has received some cost estimates for the improvements. As you know, they had the architectural drawings that were included in our packet, and the costs for that are in the millions, and that is the capital that will have to be raised by the board of directors, and they're fully aware of that. So it's like the city manager mentioned, it's really just those concrete improvements to the building itself, regardless of who goes in there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification, John. Nathan, can you jump to my favorite slide, please?
Yes, of course.
So slide 31. And I won't harp on it. You did a great job explaining this. The orange bars, you mentioned every couple of years, CalPERS comes out with their new discount rate, their new actuaries, whatever changes they're going to make. They had a good year last year with their discount rate, exceeded what their projections were. This year, with everything going on in the world, they may not be as good. So while the orange bar dropped off in 2022, 2023, the orange bar certainly could come back depending on what CalPERS board does, right?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're right. I do love the red line because that shows what our actions a few years ago did and as far as savings that we're realizing. So that's great. But I think historically you look at how CalPERS has done with their projections and their setting of their discount rates, and it's not been great. So yeah, go ahead.
So you're absolutely right. Things can change, but realize that PERS also has to adjust some of their projections for the next 2 years. They will be coming out, I think.
Usually in August.
Yeah, so in August. So one of the things that this doesn't include is the idea that the green line can go down because they're going to project, well, we had a 21% return. They're going to have to do whatever magic they do in their calculations, but conceivably, there's a chance that some of our funding could become super funded. Part of the overall reaction to that, we are absolutely budgeting all of our PERS costs. If that green line goes down, we are budgeting those costs in the upcoming fiscal years. If that happens, we will immediately come back and tell the council, yep, that's great. But what we're going to do is we're going to take what we are now projecting as our costs. If we're super funded, we will pull that money down, not as excess revenue. We will actually pull that money out and put it into a separate reserve fund. If anything, what we would probably do is take that, the fund balance reserve for pension, and we will probably just put it right into that to create some type of internal fund for some type of smoothing that as we go down the line and that orange line might pop back up, we would be able to address those. So any surpluses that we think that we're going to have based on current projections would be put into a long-term smoothing fund of some type. And we will identify that. We will account for it. We'll reserve it. And then down the road, we will use that so that we can either eliminate or reduce future orange lines or orange bars.
Thank you very much. I do have all my questions. No. Oh, comment now as well.
Yeah,
That's what I was
sure.
going to ask. Okay. I've said in a couple of the workshops that I'm not a guy who likes to take money out of a reserve account to spend on one-time projects, but I get it. We've got a lot of money that we put into our reserve account over the last few years. So I'm in agreement with the proposed projects or purchases moving forward in this budget. I've also made some comments about the growth and FTEs, full-time equivalents, that the staffing levels and how they've increased so much over the last couple of years. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we were running so lean and short-staffed for so long that it does make sense. But anytime I see that rapid growth so quickly, I get nervous as a business owner. So it's the explanations have been great, Nathan. Thank you for walking us through those staffing numbers once again. Very well done. So I do appreciate that. I think, Nathan, you mentioned historic levels of money in this budget going back into the community and community groups. I think that's great. We've got a little extra money. We've got groups in our community that do tireless work to improve our community, and it shows as you walk around town. So great presentation. Love the budget. I'm happy with it. So thank you both for all your work. Thanks all staff for all their work.
Thank you, Councilman Spookley. Councilman Berlant, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, my only question is if we could go back to the discussion on the discretionary funds, and I just wanted to make sure I was tracking all of it, specifically related to the public comment that was made earlier from the chamber, ensuring that other organizations are getting economic driving funds as well. So Nathan, can you expand on kind of where we sit with that effort that you and John are working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So what John and I have discussed is coming back in the near term and identifying a program that gives council the opportunity to analyze the public benefit. And essentially, one of the things that we're still kind of fleshing out is the kind of the trend over the last couple of years. And as a finance person, I was just kind of more or less saying, hey, John, we're spending a lot of money and we're kind of getting to a point where it's getting expensive. That's my job, right? But also, we understand that this is council's discretionary support fund. So not here to rain on anyone's parade or suggest that we do it otherwise, but we definitely want to come forward with a way for council to have all the information in front of you that you need and want to be able to weigh the public benefit, perhaps return on investment, if you will, and then go forward from there. So that's the focus that we're at right now. We've had preliminary discussions on that, but we can, John, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, we've included $20,000 towards the State Theater and also for the symphony. One of the things that we will do and specifically looking at those $20,000, especially and any other discretionary funds that would go out from the Economic Commission or any of those types of things, is the idea that we will put together a bona fide grant of how that would look like. And yes, we've included in the line items for these groups, but we will put together an overall program where we will solidify exactly what the public benefit is. And that information is going to have to be provided through some type of a granting process. And one of the things
when do you anticipate this coming out?
Well, we see this as a very high priority because this has become a very hot button issue.
Yes.
We get that, and the council can either they can tell us, look at, we want you to do more of an open grant process, maybe flexing, whether it's 20,000 or 30,000, some additional funds that could go for certain nonprofits within the organization. But from the staff perspective, we need to bring back a bona fide process that establishes that quid pro quo in the business relationship that the city will have regarding what the public benefit is and how those monies are dispersed to the organizations. Nathan and I have talked about this, and quite honestly, we need to put it all into writing and bring that back to the council to make sure that you're comfortable with the overall approach on these funds.
The Economic Development Commission has been working on this for the last 6 months because we tend to give out more grants than most of the other organizations or related to the businesses and giving those types of direct funding like that. So we've been working really hard to meet the goals that the council had around making sure that it's an open process and it's fair. And so that might be something that we could kind of piggyback off of, since that's been already kind of created with all the rules and guidelines and goals and all of the information that we'd want about how it supports the community and all that kind of stuff. So we were planning on bringing that to the council next month anyway. So that might be something that we can kind of work together, since that's already been created. Thank you. That's helpful. But I think Councilman Berlant wanted to finish.
Yeah, thank you. So returning back to my question though, thank you, John, for that. But what I heard from Nathan was a little bit of concern in the budgeting process of adding any additional dollars beyond that 20,000. And so I'm curious at what the recommendation beyond the policy component, which I understand you're going to bring back. I understand you've noted it's high priority, but in the budgeting aspect, what is the recommendation on how we actually are going to potentially add additional dollars into this line item for those additional groups that meet whatever requirements you set? And I guess Nathan, what I'm trying to get at is, should we not tonight be ensuring that that line item is the right dollar amount, since tonight is when we are budgeting for the coming fiscal year? And then I guess I ask it in a second part, which is, if you do not feel comfortable that of adding additional revenues based on where we are, does that mean we need to cut somewhere else? And just to be crystal clear, I'm not referring to the other 20,000 for the State Theater and the Symphony. But if you're not comfortable with us increasing our expenditures another 20,000, the only other way I see us doing this is by reducing somewhere else 20,000. So curious your thoughts.
Okay, so my thoughts on it are, with the $17+ million total expenditure budget that we're putting forward, I don't think $20,000 is going to move the needle very much. I think we would be fine if we were to add that kind of money to it. I'm always uncomfortable anyways being in the red to begin with, and I fought to get it down to what it is now, to be quite honest with you. However, looking at the preliminary tax receipts that were coming in from the first quarter, projecting forward, I am comfortable with where we're going. I do think we're going to be fine. We definitely have some cash right now, and I don't think, in the tens of thousands is going to hurt very much. If it were going to be like a lot more than that, I would say we probably want to give it some further analysis and potentially look at areas that we could reduce to meet that. But I think we're fine adding, the 20 to 30 range like you're talking about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I guess I guess what I'm looking for, besides the council discussion on this item, is your recommendation for us to tonight augment this budget with an additional $20,000 to $30,000 as a line item, so that as we approve and adopt this 22-23 budget, it has that money in already set aside, so that now you guys can go and work on the policy piece. And I guess with that then also comes a question, and maybe it's not fair to the economic committee that's not represented necessarily tonight, but maybe Councilwoman Riddell Harris might have a thought, is some of the $60,000 that's allocated for that committee, is that money could be identified for these large economic driving organizations? So I guess my first part, Nathan, is what do we need to do tonight to get it into it? And then my second part, and again, if the person or people that are not to answer that are not here, that's fine. But should it come out of that 60,000, I guess is my second question to staff.
I have. Question was to Nathan first.
Yes, we can add $30,000 to the, but we can actually modify the budget at your desire. So absolutely, we can change it and we can add $30,000 as a line item for essentially what would be a placeholder to come back and consider it available for use as discretionary support in the community.
Yeah, and one of the things we can do, if the council wants to augment that, yes. But also within the caveat of waiting to see, it's not like that the money's going to go out the door on Friday. That's not going to happen. What we could do is if the council wanted to augment it, have a fund, wait for the policy direction to come in, and then maybe kick the timing on all of this out and allow for an evaluation. Let's say that we waited until the fall to do it. By the fall, we will have closed out this fiscal year. We'll know where we're at regarding any of our revenues, where we landed with everything. And at that time, we can absolutely tell the council where we're at and whether the addition of 20 or 30,000 becomes some form of a burden. You can add the money in with the caveat that you want us to wait for actual timing.
Okay, and so I would like to hear from our council. How do you feel about doing that? Either putting it now or augmenting it now, having a placeholder, or we can do it later, or not at all. So I'd like to hear Councilwoman Dowden Cavillo.
Yes, so I do have some questions on the budget too, but I guess we're kind of talking about this now, but I have
You
some
can do
other
both.
questions. But we'll kind of dive into this piece of it. For me, I think absolutely we need to have a process to determine if we're going to call it grants or what have you, and that's fine, the public benefit and so forth. It's been somewhat confusing because the Economic Development Commission has kind of taken this role to determine the discretionary funding, but then the council has ultimate responsibility for it. And one of the difficulties really is that when it goes to the Economic Development Commission, the city council doesn't always see or have the opportunity to discuss that funding. How are we supporting that organization? What are the numbers or what have you? And so, it almost to me seems like we need to have a separate process really is, for this discretionary funding. And there's a difference between discretionary funding, like a line item in the budget, and supporting events or sponsoring events and doing those kinds of things. And so, I think we as a council need to determine if we're going to still keep the Economic Development Commission and doing some of that, or should it all be the responsibility of the council so that we can weigh all of, we can have the entire discussion and not just piecemeal things. Because it seems like Economic Development Commission's doing some stuff and we're doing some stuff. I do think that, right now we have proposed in the budget that's before us, the line item just for this year for symphony and for the State Theater. And I am in the position to support that with the caveat that there would be no requests for further sponsorships from those two organizations for 2022. That's their allocated funds for 2022. We haven't defined this process yet. The other organizations could still, again, if we have this process and they submit the application, there's still monies available. There's always the monies available for events and things of that nature as well. But I think that I'm comfortable with that. Again, there's a caveat that they're not going to come back to us during 2022 asking for additional funds for sponsorships, that's the money.
I guess my question is, why didn't the state and the symphony go to the economic
And I
committee?
think that
Or did they?
Traditionally, we haven't been responsible for doing the ongoing support of things that we do every year. We were supposed to be doing new things and trying to create economic development that way. We did support the event for the State Theater this year because there was a push to help events that had been not going on for a few years to help get them going again. But traditionally, the role of the Economic Development Commission wasn't to do the fireworks and do the library and all those things that every year we want to support. That was we were trying to figure out where that break was, because if we were doing that, they don't really need to come and ask if that's something we've already decided that that's what we want to do every year.
And to me, those kinds of activities where the city always partners with an organization to do certain things, whatever those things may be, to me, that should be part of the discretionary process and just put into the budget. And to just say, every year we fund ABC. It's just something that we do. It's great for the community, whatever. So we should have a line item for ABC because we just do it every year as opposed to requiring them to request it.
So just to get to the point then, it sounds like what I hear you saying then is that you would support additional funding for, we have AB, but for a C.
And
how much?
Yes, we have to determine what that amount is. But I think that, in that application process for that discretionary funding, I think the other thing that we haven't talked about is what funding are those organizations receiving already, or have they received, so that we can evaluate that as well. That would be for anybody that's coming to the council requesting that discretionary funding.
Sure.
I want to know, what have we given to them for the past 3 years?
Yes.
And,
So you want that part of the process. So I guess the question here that we have to determine, I'd like to hear from the others, is do we want to put it in the budget this year, have a placeholder or not? And I don't know, Councilman Berlander, Spokely, do you?
Yeah, I got to, ask my question. I obviously had one other piece that I didn't hear, and I don't want to put Councilwoman Rita Harris on the spot, but the 60,000 for the Economic Commission, that 60,000 is not really intended for what we're discussing here. Is that correct? Or do you think there is overlap in kind of these larger ongoing requests?
So for the budget for the EDC for this next year, majority of that budget is allocated towards the marketing project that we're working on for the city, because the city has decided that we don't have the resources internally to staff that project. So the committee has decided to kind of take that and run with it and kind of toe that line, since there's not internal staff to manage that RFP process. So I think there's only 20 or 25 grand that's actually going towards grants this year out of our budget. The rest of it's all going towards that marketing effort to create that economic development as a community to do that effort. The 25 grand that we had left were supposed to go to event sponsorships of new events, business improvement projects, and community enhancements. And those are all lined out in the application process that we created. And we were going to give those applications out, I think we said like October and February, something like that, twice a year, have a competitive process that everyone competes in, knows what the rankings are ahead of time, and it's well advertised, so everyone has a chance to participate in that process, which we think is a valuable effort to have. If we decide to give that 20 grand to one or two organizations, it does prevent us from being able to have that opportunity for smaller businesses to have those opportunities. So that's a choice that we would need to make as a council, that's what we want to do. But I am a little leery about us continuing to add specific line items for specific organizations, because there's a lot of deserving organizations in the community, and we need to be a little careful about being that funding source for all those organizations, especially as if the economy is going, then they're going to have a hard time, and taking that money back away.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess my comment would be, I would vote that we do increase the discretionary funds, seeing as it's not part of what the EDC is right now looking at. So I would ask that we do increase it, whether it be $20,000, $30,000, then allow staff to expedite a transparent process, set that same bar that the symphony and the State Theater meet. And if there are any other organizations that meet that same bar, now we've set aside dollars that the city staff could then provide that stable, yet only one time for now, funding. And then we have the discussion next of, do we just now have these larger organizations and that threshold be ongoing? So I would advocate we add that $20,000 or $30,000 to this line item.
And I'd like to jump in and support that, because I do think that it's a fair process. It's fair that we do that. And I do believe that we may not even spend it if they don't meet the criteria. And also, I think it's important that we do support our large economic drivers. So I'm extremely supportive. If there's some opportunity for a nonprofit out there that meets the criteria, then by all means, we have it. Let's do it. So that's my opinion, but
I'm in agreement. $20,000 placeholder while we work out the details makes sense to me.
thank you.
Can we make sure that maybe in the next budget cycle, we go through this process with any of the interested nonprofits, maybe in that March, April timeframe? So that way we know what that amount is, so we can make sure that we budget appropriately and make sure we have enough money for everybody that wants to.
Yeah, I second that as direction. I think that should be direction to staff because we're kind of in an awkward spot, just to be frank with you. Trying to be fair, but also be respectful for those organizations that already asked. But I would agree that once we set the bar, hopefully this becomes a non-issue. And hopefully we're in this position next year financially that we can continue to afford to do this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
I can tell you from the staff perspective, we will absolutely, you're going to get this twice in the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. And Councilwoman.
Yes, thank you. So I had some other questions with regard to the budget before we got into this issue. In the budget and thank you very much for your presentation. And I know we've had so much time to really discuss the budget at detail, but now we kind of got the devils in the details. We actually got all the line items. So in the transportation fund, and this I wanted to kind of talk about because I know that so many of our constituents have probably raised this with all of you, but with regards to sidewalk repairs, we've allocated $25,000 for commercial sidewalk repairs and another $15,000 for residential sidewalk repairs. And we've got this great index survey that we've had done for our streets to determine the grade of our streets, and that helps us to establish the priorities for paving going forward and so forth. And I don't think we've done something like that for sidewalks, but we all know that a lot of our sidewalks are in bad shape, especially downtown and Old Town. And so I just kind of wanted to hear, how are we determining which sidewalks we are going to be repairing this year? And I know the city manager, Nathan, you don't, you're looking like
So the 25,000 is going to go straight into the core of both the downtown and Old Town. And we will specifically use those funds to go after some sidewalks that we know within our overall ADA plan need to be replaced. Over the past number of years, sidewalk repairs have been correlated to where we're doing street repairs. In this case, we'll go in, we'll do the sidewalk replacements with that 25,000 in some areas that aren't necessarily on the list for the street. So these are very targeted. We've put 15,000 in there for additional repairs that may come up again in some of the residential areas. We still need to do many of the areas where we're doing the street. There is a relationship between doing paving work and where all those things, where we will also be doing additional curb cuts and those types of things. But bottom line, the 25,000 goes targeted into our main commercial areas to address some areas that we know need to be done. And then as part of the overall asset management program, we started with the streets, we're moving to the sewer. We will get to, as part of the overall asset management program, of doing inventorying and identifying curbs, gutters, and sidewalks that will come down, but that'll come as part of the overall asset management program.
I'm glad to hear that will ultimately be part of the asset management plan. I think it's really important. And I just want to kind of differentiate, because I know that we're required by ADA to have that, the dots and the curbs and so forth. But I mean, so many of the sidewalks have giant cracks in them that are, just a huge liability issue and so forth. And so we're going to actually tackle some of that too. It's not just the grade on the curbs and the ADA accessibility. Are we going to actually work on some of those big cracks, where the sidewalks differentiate in elevation? And
I just wanted to jump in on a current city ordinance regarding sidewalk maintenance and repair for as part of this discussion.
Huh?
I'll let the city manager jump in on the particulars of what this money will go to spend.
Yeah.
But state law allows, and the city has adopted an ordinance that says each property owner is responsible for sidewalk maintenance and what is adjacent to and abutting their property, and also liable for any damages or harm that's caused for people
So
traveling on it.
is that for residents and commercial?
I believe so, yes.
So our public sidewalks that are downtown are the responsibility of the business owners that own right in front of their businesses?
I believe that's right. Let me confirm in the ordinance right now during this discussion. I have my computer here. It certainly applies to residential properties. for sure.
And I understand what the residential, but the issue, I mean, it seems like that's so piecemeal because I don't know if we even have businesses that are improving the sidewalk or if they even know that they have to improve the sidewalk, you know, I mean, people, I remember hearing this. This is something that's been on the books a long time, but we're talking about, we have this money allocated for the sidewalk repair. So that's why I brought it up because well, no, what I really wanted to understand is what was going to be repaired and what was going to be, that initially was my question, but now I'm hearing that really it's the business owner's responsibility. It's not the business owner's responsibility to make ADA access. That's ours. So it sounds like the 25,000 and the 15,000 is ADA access, not actual improvements, because our ordinance says that we don't deal with that big segment of sidewalk that has a big crack in it, right?
Correct. I'm just unequivocally, the 25,000 is going to go to the corners, which will go to the curb cuts for the accessibility.
But I'm sorry, but we are going to do an asset management for the sidewalk, curbs and gutters overall, not just ADA access. So then we're going to say, okay, well, this section of sidewalk is really bad. So business owner, you need to fix it, or, I mean.
Yeah, curbs, gutter, and sidewalk. One of the things that, I hate to say this is going to be the engineer's intern project, but the idea of going throughout the city, inventorying overall condition, indexing for our overall sidewalks, identifying where that stuff needs to be repaired. We simply don't have that. The low hanging fruit is that we do know that we have main commercial areas where we need to replace those corners, and that's what we're going to do with these monies.
Just that follow up on what Councilwoman Dowden-Calvillo is saying. Sorry, I'm trying to get a sense of this. ADA access also would be being able to get down the sidewalk without tipping over, or, I mean, I'm just trying, if we're in charge of ADA, if there's a huge difference in the sidewalk, then that's impacts the ADA access as well. So are we at that point, would we go and tell and maybe write something to that person telling them to fix the sidewalk, or?
Maybe, you know what I think we should do? I think our attorney has the short answer. Then we should probably bring this discussion back.
Yeah, I would like
It's
to
worthy
have
of a discussion.
I
'Cause
would very
everybody
much
knows
like that.
our sidewalks are probably in some regard worse than our roads. They are, some of
Some
them.
instances.
But
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah,
I
so
would appreciate that,
Yeah,
Madam Mayor.
me too.
it does apply to commercial owners as well as residential. It does require a notice to them to trigger their responsibility to do the repairs. And there is a process for the city to come and do the repairs after the notice and then lien or assess the property.
I just think it is worthy of discussion because I do have a little bit of concern, especially when we're talking about it's our requirement, it's our responsibility to ensure ADA access. And yes, curbs are part of that, but it's just, as you mentioned, that's the sidewalks are just, there's giant cracks in them. And I mean, that's part of the ADA too. So looking forward to having a robust discussion on this topic, Madam Mayor, at a later time.
I think that's something we should.
I did have other questions on the
Sure.
budget, Madam Mayor. Looking under the performance report, I just noted that under citywide administrative performance criteria, that we had an estimated 20 workers' comp claims for, that are estimated for 21, 22. We're projecting 15 in 22, 23. In the past, in 2021, we had 5, and in 2019, 20, we had 10. And I'm just wondering if we're putting in place any additional, training or anything to try to prevent these kinds of workers' comp issues coming forward or injuries that are happening on the job.
Yes, we actually, within the last 6 months, we've enacted what we call a risk management committee.
Okay.
One of the things that we've updated, but it still needs to be updated even more. All organizations our size are required to have what is known as an injury and illness prevention plan. And we are looking at that. An organization like ours should have things like a safety committee, which we currently don't have, but we will have moving forward. But as we look at workers' comp, things like a safety committee would be reviewing if there's any type of injury on the job, and they would be making recommendations. So the answer to your question, we've just put together a risk management committee. It's working. Now we do need to update some key policy documents, and yes, we need to do training.
Great. I'm very happy to hear that because I know that those workers' comp, those costs escalate for insurance and things of that nature for the cities. So there is a liability there. So, and you're right, we do need to have that safety committee. I know Sacramento County has a very robust, obviously they're bigger, but in any event, thank you.
Councilwoman, if I may, sorry, I apologize for the interruption. I just want to add some context too. That is heavily impacted by COVID-19.
Okay. Mhm.
I asked that
a good
question
point.
too. I serve on the board of the NCCSIF as well. We just had a board meeting this week, and a lot of those are COVID-19. What's happening right now is the state is actually providing some pay for people, but that's going to expire.
Mhm.
Prior to that, though, a lot of these folks were just going to the doctor. And when it's someone who deals with the public sphere, it's very difficult to ascertain whether they encountered it at work or at home. So in a lot of cases, you're seeing not just us, a lot of agencies have seen a spike in workers' comp claims. The good news about those claims, though, is that they're being closed out.
Okay.
These are not long-term lingering kind of, types of claims that, you get in there, you get treated and you move on. So yes, the claims are higher, but they're not necessarily the kind that are going to cost the city a ton of money. It's not moderate necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you
Sure.
for the clarification. That helps to give me a little bit more, comfort. Let me see here. No, I also under code enforcement, under workload indicators, we have business licensing, and it looks like, if I'm reading this right, that in 2019, 20, and then in 2021 and 21, 22, we've had 10 separate, we've investigated, I think here what you're saying is that we've investigated 10 different complaints for violations of business licenses, but now we're just projecting one. So that's nice. I mean, but I just wonder how we got that.
Pedro, you on, please?
Well, mine,
Oh, you're in the agenda? Okay.
yeah, it's under code enforcement, my
Okay.
page 43, but
Got
I don't
it.
know if it's 43 of the packet because I'm using the document that was given to us.
Okay. Got it. And you were asking about the business
Yeah,
licensing and why it went.
projected one. I guess we've investigated 10 business license issues and now we're just projecting one. And I just wondered how we got one.
I'm going to go out on
10, 10, 10. It was a number that stood out to me.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that our administrative services director has a typo there
Okay.
that he probably needs to correct. I'll have a conversation with him.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
There's
There's a
kind
good
of,
chance of that. Yeah.
you know that I'm reading this, okay?
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, that's.
I appreciate
I
it.
guess that's the plus side. Is
I,
that
you know what?
that
I'm catching mistakes and I'm thinking,
I
man,
just wanted to ask it. And then, I think. What are my glasses? If I had anything else. In the budget line items for departmental expenditure account detail for Public Works, it looks like we have personnel services at 544,968. And that is to include the additional staff, right? Is that why that number went so high? Because we were in 21, 22 at 320,000, and then for 22, 23, we're at 554,000. So that was just,
Mhm. Yes.
how many FTEs was that? I don't remember that were in the public works. Sometimes it's helpful to have FTEs in here too, just so that,
Yeah.
I can't remember if that was somewhere
By
else.
department, right. So in the front, we do have a very high level FTE count. So, but
I
it's
know
not
we
going to
have
give
that.
you.
I know we have
Yeah.
that like separate, but sometimes it's nice to see that with the dollar data as well, just to kind of, because then you have to reference it somewhere else. But
Mhm.
so how many employees was that?
There's
Additional?
11 public works.
But how
FTEs.
many were the two, there are two new ones, or how many new ones were there?
Well, there's one that is the engineer, the planning.
That's what it, okay.
Yeah, but that's not a general fund cost.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that was it. That's the extent of my detailed questions at this time.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from the public? No? Do I have a motion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would move that we adopt the revenue estimates and expenditure appropriations for all city funds for fiscal 22 to 23 as summarized in the proposed budget, with the addition of an additional $20,000 added to the discretionary funds.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spockley,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Amara.
Aye, thank you very much. That passes.
And then I'd also,
We have
Madam
one
Mayor,
second
by resolution
It sounds like
establish.
Councilmember Berlant.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Now we can.
I'd also, by resolution, make a motion that we establish a general fund cash reserve in the amount of $5,847,081 to be exact for fiscal year 22-23.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spockley,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. You have the second page.
Oh, the next item on the agenda is the cancellation of the
Sorry. So next we have the cancellation of the August regular city council meeting.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, staff's put this on. A lot of organizations use the month of August as a chance basically to go dark as far as their regular meetings go. Staff's put this on for the consideration for if the council would like to basically recess the meetings for August. They can do both meetings, can do one meeting. But just as an option, August is very much a transition month for the organization. It also gives it from a standpoint, from a management standpoint, to kind of force everybody to take their vacations and do those types of things. So staff has put this on, and just for the consideration of the council, and you can give us any direction that you'd like to.
Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the request. But in all honesty, for the city council, I don't feel comfortable canceling both meetings for the month of August. I can support canceling one, but I really feel that we have work to do. We know that there are issues that we've asked that come back to us in a relatively quick turnaround time. And I really I'm not comfortable with canceling both meetings for the month of August. I don't have a preference on whether or not we would cancel August 8th versus August 22nd, but I would not support canceling both.
Anyone else?
I would support canceling August 8th just because it's the first week of school and a lot of people are very busy that week versus the meeting at the end of the month. And so if we were going to cancel one, I would recommend the first one.
Is that the first Monday?
Yeah.
Or
August.
second Monday?
Yes.
Second
Okay.
Monday.
August 8th and August 22nd.
You okay with that? Councilman Berlant, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I agree completely with Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo. I will say that I had a good conversation with the city manager expressing my concern, and he brought up some very valid points as far as staff timing. And I think that if we're now just talking one meeting, then I support it. I only would support us canceling both meetings if that's truly what the city staff wanted, and with the notion that if important business came up, just like any time that we would put it back onto the agenda, even if it then makes it a special meeting, but still would allow us to hold business. But yeah, support the plan.
And the city manager, do you have any input on that? Okay.
August 8th.
Okay, good. Do we need a motion?
I think we do.
Okay,
Madam
so-
Clerk, correct? So I'll make a motion that we cancel the August 8th meeting, regular meeting of the city council.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berliak,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor O'Mara.
Yes, thank you very much. City manager report.
Mayor and council, just real briefly, last week was super busy. I'd like to recognize Amber Carroll, who works in my office, for us pulling off the international dinner for the Western States Run. That was a lot of work, and it was absolutely a miracle. Literally, she and I dragging shopping carts through the Smart and Final parking lot to try and make it all come together. But at the end of the day, it certainly did. I think the Western States Run had no less than 1,200 volunteers. It really does take a village on some things. And in this case, staffing 17 aid stations and pulling off a world-class event takes a lot of people. I can't say enough for all of them. Auburn Police Department, our volunteers with the Auburn PD did an absolutely exceptional job. They were out and telling people where they can and can't go is not an easy task. So I give a lot of credit to them. The council mentioned some of the people who finished the race. The one kid, Adam Peterman, who won the race, his definition that there are higher beings that run. He was quite a physical specimen, but also Ruth Croft shows that eventually we will have females winning this race. So it was a pretty stellar weekend. I will tell you that I appreciate the council's in looking at the overall budget. I will tell you, I think you've done a stellar job. There are a lot of really good questions, the concerns, the detail. I get to talk with all of you about all these things, and the amount of work that the council did has been exceptional, as well as the entire staff. I give Nathan Bagwell a lot of credit. This has been a very heavy lift. The budget and our performance indicators will evolve. The modernization of the city organization with the budget will involve things like dashboards, performance indicators. As the city goes through all this over the next 24-month period, Auburn will become an organization where our residents are able to get more information, more data than they ever have. And much of that will be in real-time data. So we're at a really important point, and I think the upcoming budget's going to do some amazing things. So with that, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City Council committee reports. I'll just go in order.
So the Economic Development Board for Placer County met on June 16th. We had a couple presentations that were really interesting. The Growth Factory, which is a startup accelerator and venture fund that helps with new startups in the area. They just moved into Roseville, and they're looking at, they do kind of crowdsourcing and getting, they don't work on one or two funding sources. They have hundreds of people that work together, and they have lots of mentoring and things for new businesses. So it's going to be a great, I think, asset to the community. And I think it might be interesting to maybe have them come up and do a presentation for us as well. So that was great. And then we also had, there's a I'm gonna forget her name right now. There's a new person in charge of economic development for Placer County, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Anyway, she's great. Really excited to have her, and she did a presentation on the Placer Business Resource Center, where they have workshops and one-on-one advising for businesses, also regulatory assistance, and they work on workforce development. And they have some really great resources that our businesses can utilize. So we need to make sure that we're recommending those and giving that assistance to our businesses. So that was the main meeting that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dowden Cavillo.
Yes, so I'm trying to remember all the different meetings. SHAC will be presenting an item for consent to increase the membership of its committee by one to allow for the appointment of April as a local historian. She served on SHAC as the city's historian, but then resigned in that capacity. So we will be submitting a request, a consent item, just to increase our membership and then to appoint her to that seat. There are subsequent amendments that will be forthcoming to the enabling resolution that deal with everything from the tile criteria for application and fee. And so right now we're actually suspending the application of our tiles because we have to, not only do we have to update the fee to reflect the charges that are coming from Rucola, who does the engraving, because those costs have actually doubled. But we also really need to fine tune the criteria for the acceptance of those tiles and to better explain the application process and have better and more clearer instructions. So when people are applying for the tiles, it's clear to them what they need to be able to really demonstrate. So the criteria will come to the council because that's really up to the council to make that determination in the form of changes to the enabling resolution. So again, we're just having a temporary suspension of applications at this time because I know there are a couple that are kind of floating out there. With regards to Endurance Capital of the World Committee, we've been incredibly active lately with the Western States Endurance Run. We had a booth at the finish line. It was great. People always come to spin the wheel and learn more about Endurance Capital of the World. So great thing. We have Tevis Cup coming up in a couple weeks. So we just continuously work on those efforts. Pioneer Energy, we met a couple weeks ago. We adopted our budget for the fiscal year. And also Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, just to make a notation that we also established our budget, but also Mike Lucan, our executive director, announced his impending retirement. So he will be retiring and we will have an extensive recruiting effort to find someone to replace him.
He's too young.
Yeah. So, and I'm trying to think if they're, at this time, that's all that I can.
Councilman Stokely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did have a SACOG meeting last week. The big topic of conversation is Sacramento County sales tax initiative that they're pursuing. It's a constituent-led sales tax initiative. The challenge that we have is the schedule that they have for significant capacity improving projects could potentially have an effect on El Dorado County and Placer County's ability to also do projects. It also affects the other 4 counties besides us. So the mayor is apparently behind this citizens initiative and pushing pretty hard. It is creating quite a stir within the 6 county SACOG membership group. And we're monitoring it very closely here at Placer County. Thanks to Mike's leadership, we're going to try to get together and kind of strategize on what this actually means for us and us being able to deliver projects in Placer County. So again, they're advancing all of these major projects to the point where it'll be impossible for us to meet our MTP SCS goals, 19% reductions. So it's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. So I'll keep the council posted.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilman Berland.
Okay, I have a handful, so I'm going to go really quick. Greater Auburn Fire Safe Council met actually 2 weeks ago. One of the things I just wanted to quickly mention, everybody, is the council continues to expand the red flag warning program. Kathy Baxter has been coordinating that and now has 25 red flags that go up across not just the city of Auburn, but throughout the Fire Safe Council area, which includes Bowman, Newcastle, and Penryn. And she is looking to expand with more volunteers. So those red flag warnings are really important. They're the days that there are peak fire conditions, and reminder for everyone to be safe. So lots of good work going on at the Fire Safe Council. They do have in 2 weeks an educational forum on July 8th, I think it is, if that's Friday, at lunchtime. So if you're interested, I can send you the link to that information. Auburn Arts Commission is exhausting, so I won't try to even cover everything, but I want to hit on, if you haven't participated in their summer concert series, check out the wonderful bands that they have down in the Auburn School Park Preserve right there behind you. But then also you can kind of get a sneak peek, the Auburn Arts Commission, and more importantly, the Auburn Downtown Business Association, April Maynard, and has really worked hard to fund that program during Drake finds singers and bands to play at Central Square on Fridays and Saturdays. So again, the live music really has spiced up downtown. The Plus County Air Pollution Control District met a couple weeks ago. Nothing major to report there. We approved their preliminary budget. And then lastly, this got mentioned at the last meeting, and I know Mayor mentioned it last week at Medler's. I did want to let the entire council know that the mayor and I and our city manager had some conversations regarding the Wildfire and Public Safety Advisory Ad Hoc Committee and some concerns by some of those committee members. So I did go and speak with them and help answer a few of the questions of our intent for that committee. And I think that helped remotivate some of those committee members and get the overall committee back on track. So they should be coming to us any day now, I think in July, to bring their report out. So looking forward to that. With that, in a report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for me, I want to also thank Councilman Berlamp for addressing the committee. They did have a lot of concerns, and he put them at ease, and that committee went forward. And now they're very pleased with the way it was conducted. So with that, also, I had a mosquito vector meeting, and they adopted their budget. But good news, because of the drought, fewer mosquitoes. So it's dry. Anyway, then sustainability met, and big topic of discussion was to landscape the front of City Hall such that it has a drought resistant landscape. They brought up all kinds of beautiful ideas and ways that we can make City Hall so that we can exemplify how to save water, because unfortunately in California, we have to start saving water. So that's going to be a project coming up. How far they get, we don't know in terms of just design, implementing it might be a whole.
PCWA also has money for that too, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say they have money for that.
PCWA.
Yeah, they might
okay.
have like a cash for grass kind of thing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. So we should look into that. And, the fire station did the same thing. The
Yes,
Eagle Scouts
okay.
did that.
And then as far as waste management, there is a big push through sustainability, where we have a meeting with our city manager and hopefully waste management, because only 8% of our compost is being recycled at the dump. And so this committee is very involved in this process. And they have flyers. Again, I think I was talking about, maybe it's Medlers, all these meetings, but they have a beautiful flyers to pass out to the local businesses so that they will use non-plastics and recyclable takeouts, and encourage people to bring in their own bags so that they don't have to use plastics. But especially there's a lot of places, and I'm very pleased we don't have any styrofoam here now. Good job. So anyway, that's an ongoing project. They're going to go around and email and talk to each owner of each business and try and give them examples of what they can use for takeout. There's also talk of, the glyphosate. We have one member who's working very closely with Matt Carducci. It appears that it is more expensive, so they're looking at other opportunities to eliminate weeds and but there has to be, there'll be a presentation and options. And finally, there will be, I believe at the next meeting, we said a member of the sustainability that will come and discuss plastics just briefly. And finally, I'm not even sure, I think the Downtown Business Association met a couple weeks ago. But in any case, one thing I do want to remind everybody of, I think one of their projects is kind of exciting for me anyway. You see what they do, the music and everything, but they're going to have a daffodil project. So be ready to either contribute or plant or help, but daffodils are going to be all around Auburn. I think that's so exciting. So that is the extent of what I have to say. And I just wanted to also give a shout out to everyone who helped on this Western States Endurance. I think our city manager mentioned it, the police, our city, everyone who supported it. It really was quite an event. There were a lot of folks around town. I was fortunate enough to walk around town and meet many of them who were going in our restaurants and drinking our drinks and our beer. And many of them said, I want to move here. Many of them said, I love this place. I come and train here all the time, and I'm coming downtown using your restaurants. And so they're very excited. They come here throughout the year for this opportunity to compete and use our canyons. And there really were people from all over the world. You have France, Australia, and our city manager gave a little talk in every language. I think you said hello or thank you. So it really was a phenomenal event. And I think Auburn will see some really benefit to this in the future. So anyway, with that, I think if anybody has anything else, otherwise we will adjourn.